So my name is Alexandra Wharton, and I'm a board member of the Circadian Sleep Disorders Network. And I'm here today to talk about delayed sleep phase disorder, which I'll call, it's now technically called delayed sleep wake phase disorder, which I'll call DSPD. It is a circadian rhythm disorder that causes a person's internal body clock to be delayed by about 4 hours. It's an intractable condition. It can't be adjusted through self-discipline or willpower. And it's actually not that rare. About 1 in 600 adults has it. That's 500,000 Americans. And 1 in 75 people have the CRY1 gene variant that's been proven to cause delayed sleep in humans. Unfortunately, even today, it's still, frequently misdiagnosed as "quote unquote" chronic insomnia. Clinicians believe it's depression or anxiety that is causing the patient's inability to fall asleep earlier. And not only is it misdiagnosed, but it's also mistreated. So first-line treatments include chronotherapy, which has been shown to turn DSPD into non-24, which is even worse. Or because it's thought to be depression or anxiety, SSRIs like Celexa are prescribed, and they've been shown to maybe even weaken circadian rhythms, making DSPD even worse. Or, of course, hypnotics like Ambien, which can lead to dependency. So needless to say, more awareness of DSPD and all circadian rhythm disorders is desperately needed. The growth of Fitbit and personal activity trackers has generated mainstream interest in monitoring a person's sleep patterns. However, technology isn't really required. You can just print out a 2-week sleep log from the internet and fill it out with a pencil, take it to your doctor. That I feel really passionate about this in terms of diagnosis. And that clinician should take a careful patient history. And when a patient says, I can't fall asleep until 4 o'clock in the morning every night, despite following all the basic best practices for sleep hygiene, like, getting up at the same time every day and not drinking alcohol and not drinking caffeine and exercising and light and they should have, DSPD in mind. Unfortunately, that's still not, quite happening. You can go to a sleep specialist who trained at the Mayo Clinic in Austin, Texas, and they will still give you the, you lack willpower speech. It's very frustrating. So a sleep log and a careful patient history are all you really need to diagnose DSPD. They're more effective than an overnight sleep study. Of course, sleep studies are still important for ruling out other things. Also, biomarkers like cortisol and melatonin. Of course, that kind of testing is very cumbersome, but you can actually track it in somebody and it will indicate that a person does indeed have a later chronotype. Several neurological and metabolic conditions are comorbid with DSPD, from diabetes to bipolar disorder to autism. In fact, something like 80% of ADHD cases in children report having delayed sleep. And it makes perfect sense to me. It's energy at the wrong time of the day. An MRI can actually show that a night owl, a person with DSPD, that's kind of like the warm, fuzzy word for it. Some people don't like that word, but I think when we talk about an extreme night owl, meaning somebody who can't fall asleep till 4 o'clock in the morning or later, it actually shows that their prefrontal cortex is in a disabled offline state until the late morning. For typical sleepers, environmental cues help set their body clock. And that's, of course, something that we've all been told since we were children. Light exposure, social activities, meal times, body temperature. Those are the things that set your body clock for a typical sleeper. However, these cues are not effective for people with DSPD. There is simply something else going on. Possible causes include reduced or oversensitivity to light, deficiencies in a certain type of retinal ganglion cell called the IPRGCs, reduced melatonin production, a longer intrinsic circadian phase, homeostatic processing disorders where, we don't have like the buildup of sleep throughout the day that a typical person does. For treatments, there really is no magic bullet for DSPD. Light therapy and melatonin have been recommended for decades. Now on the market, there's some melatonin agonists like Hetlioz. Most importantly, for most, I would say, who have this is an accommodated schedule. Simply being able to, ask for and get later hours. So if you work in a 9 to 5 office, can I come in 11 to 7? And of course, the COVID pandemic has kind of demonstrated that the world doesn't fall apart when we have accommodated schedules, right? To develop more effective treatments, obviously, we need to understand the physiological underpinnings of what's happening. And there is some hope on the horizon in that. Of course, I think everybody knows that the Nobel Prize winners in 2017 were body clock researchers, and they, among many things that they did, they investigated how mammals' biorhythms sync with the rotation of the Earth. And of course, some have a 22-hour-long clock, some have a 27-hour-long clock. Also on the horizon is a blood test called time signature. That's what it's called right now anyway. It's not clinically available yet. It was developed by Dr. Phyllis Z in Chicago and several other people there, that calculates a person's circadian phase by measuring different gene expression markers. Of course, this could be a big game changer. We do know that various circadian clock genes are implicated or cause delayed sleep. I already talked about CRY1, which stands for cryptochrome. But there's other ones like the clock gene, the PER gene. And I know I saw Dr. Potachik's talk earlier, so he already touched on this, but he and Dr. Fu's lab at UCSF has identified a gene variant for short sleepers. And I was actually in one of his studies 15, 16 years ago, which piqued my interest in all of this. Of course, now with 23andMe, you can do that at home. And they have some of the variants for morningness. And, as I've been told, the eveningness ones, it's a lot more complicated. It's a little bit messier, but hopefully they will get there. UC Santa Cruz's lab, Dr. Carrie Parch, she is also investigating the CRY1 variant that I mentioned, and how it alters the biological clock. And she said in a release last year or 2 years ago that, they hope to develop therapeutics that could actually shorten the body clock. And then finally, this was really interesting. This was just announced like last month. 2 different universities, they identified the cryptochrome 4 protein in the retina of a European robin, which is a songbird that migrates at night. And they found that this protein is sensitive to magnetic fields and could be the long sought magnetic sensor, which would mean that environmental stimuli, just like I was talking about with those environmental cues, is a lot less important than has been previously thought. So a lot of exciting things, I think, happening with chronobiologists. But in the meantime, I'm working as part of Circadian Sleep Disorders Network, and I'm also a chapter leader for Start School Later Texas, and it's in addition to some other sleep organizations. And I'm just trying to push that we need to reassess our 9 to 5 schedule. Our work no longer requires sunlight, and only 1% of the U.S. population works in agriculture, yet we still live on an agrarian schedule. And in conclusion, we just need to increase awareness that DSPD is a physiological condition and not a psychological condition. Improve diagnosis. And again, like that doesn't need to be, it can be a printed out sleep log is a great start. improve treatments, increase the amount of treatments, seek accommodations at work and school, and reduce the stigma of having a late chronotype. Like, it's okay to go to bed later and wake up later and not calling it sleeping in.